Hey, listeners. My name is Elisha, the founder of the Witnesses podcast. It's so beautiful to have you listening to our podcast. And I want you to know something that means a whole lot to me. Thank you for tuning in. And one thing I love to tell all of our listeners is it's not just about you listening, but listening to understand. Understanding is the most important thing. So important. So you have to listen, learn, and practice. Thank you so very much and happy listening. Hi, Clay. It's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, some hours ago, I was with one of our guests, Louis. So I was sharing with her how an elderly woman was sharing with me the impact our show is having upon her and her family. So excited. And that's the essence of this show. We bring guests who have triumphed over one challenges or another to come talk to us about their stories and how they came out of it. Yeah, because we believe that someone might be stuck in that situation and a piece of information from someone who came out of that situation triumphantly will transform their lives. That's our belief. So it's so nice to have you on the show, Clay. So within the next 20 minutes, I want you to talk to us about your story, the challenges that you faced, and how you came out of it triumphantly. Let's get started.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So my story is rather interesting in that it starts off not interesting. So my wife and I were married, and a year after we were married, she was diagnosed with a form of cancer called Hodgkin's disease, and she was treated for that. Went through chemotherapy, but survived it well. The doctor suggested we wait several years, 5 or 6 years, to have children because of it. So we did. And 8 years later, our oldest daughter was born. Everything was great. Uh, a child who was smiling from the time she was born. Could not have been better. To the point that we knew, lightning does not strike the same rib twice. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And 3 years later, her
Yeah.
sisters were born. And initially, we knew things were unusual. My wife's pregnancy was very difficult the second time around compared to the first one, but got through it. Our twins were born, and almost immediately we knew we were going to have some tough challenges because unlike their big sister, they cried all the time. They were upset. They wouldn't eat, and this was as babies. It was very, very difficult. And finally, when they were 2 years old, we went to the doctor, and they have what's called a well baby visit, where you take your child in, and they have a checklist of 25 different items to see how well the baby is developing. It's called a milestone checklist.
Okay.
And I was holding one of our twins, and my wife was holding the other twin, and we went through it, and we went down the list for the twin we were holding, and we got to the bottom and realized that neither one of us had checked anything off the list. I'm like, well, that's not a good sign. And again, they were 2 years old. So we were sent to Easter Seals to do an evaluation, and that's when they received their first diagnosis of intellectual disabilities and autism. So it was not something we were expecting, and we tried to approach it as best as we can. Again, the twins cried all the time, would have serious meltdowns. The To bring it forward a little bit to help understand where they are now. So they are 23 years old now. They have
Oh,
never spoken. Their behaviors have improved, even though one of them is having some challenges right now. But it's much better than it used to be. They need help with what's called all activities of daily living. So everything bathroom related. They need help with getting dressed and undressed. They can feed themselves and they are
okay.
mobile, but they need help with pretty much everything else. So they need full-time 24/7 care. So that was kind of the original challenge. And my story on terms of how we got through it was one night. It was a Friday night. The twins were about 4 years old, and they were very upset. They were crying, and we couldn't figure out why. Their big sister was upset. Their mom was not doing well. She was mad at the world. So I did what any good father and husband would do in a situation like that. I went to bed. And I thought, I can't fix this problem right now. It'll still be here tomorrow. Everybody's safe. We'll figure it out later. So I went to bed, and I'm lying there, and I'll be honest with you, I was mad at God, and I remember praying, God, why did you do this to Paige and Mia? That's my twins' names. Why did you do this to Paige and Mia? And to be blunt, why did you do this to me? And that's the question I had on my mind when I fell asleep was, God, why did you do this? Well, I don't usually go to bed mad. The couple of times I'll wake up madder the next morning than I was the night before. But that Saturday morning, I woke up and it was totally different. I woke up and I was excited. It was like I had fresh air in my lungs. I wanted to take on the world. I was just ready to go after it. And the very first words that entered my head were to help people like Paige and Mia. To help people like Paige and Mia, which I immediately interpreted as to help people with severe disabilities like they have.
Yeah.
Well, I know for a fact that had to be God, because given my priorities at the time, focused on my family, focusing on my job, there's no way I would have cooked that answer up on my own. And I know for a fact that it was God, because I fell asleep asking God a question, and I believe he sent the Holy Spirit and answered it. I fell asleep asking God, why did you do this? And I believe he sent the Holy Spirit and told me it was to help people with severe disabilities like they have. So I sat there for a moment, and two good things happened. Number one was it happened. Number two was I had the wherewithal to realize that it happened. Okay. So having realized, I just basically got a message from God, not to sound strange, but that's in essence what it was. And I'm like, okay, what do I do with this information? So I did what millions of people do when they have questions. I went to my computer and I Googled it. And I typed 4 words. And forgive the language. The language has improved over the last 25 years, but or 23 years. But their original diagnosis was called mental retardation. So I typed 4 words: mental retardation, Dallas, which is where I live, help. Mental retardation, Dallas, help. Enter. And up came an organization I had never heard of before called the Arc of Dallas. And the ARC system in the United States is the oldest system of nonprofit organizations serving people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and autism and so on, like my twins have. So I looked at that and I said, all right, well, that looks like an organization that helps people like Paige and Mia. And to make a long story short, I reached out to them on Monday morning. Within 2 weeks, I was on their board of directors. I became their next board president. And in the process, I was meeting lots of families. I was learning about the system, our support system, learning what families need, what the challenges are. I got onto the state level board of directors and became their president. And in that case, I was meeting legislators. I was meeting like state representatives and state senators, working with administrators at Texas Health and Human Services, understanding the service support system. And along the way, I was sharing what I learned back with the families that I was meeting. Eventually, President Barack Obama appointed me to a presidential advisory committee in Washington. And so I was able to influence and help influence the system and help a lot of families along the way and kind of fulfill that direction. So all that happened as a result of me going to bed mad on a Friday night and asking God, why did you do this? And it really became the focus of of my identity. So I'm blessed to know thousands of people, and 95% of the people I know have absolutely no idea what I did for a living. They had no idea how I paid my bills, but everybody knew what I did for free. And it's not so much that I was doing it for free, but again, that's where the identity came from. It did not come from my job, which is where most people, particularly men, get a lot of their identity from. So that was the long story to answer your question on, what were the challenges that were met. And then how did I get through them? And it was basically responding to a call or an instruction from God to get focused on how can I serve people who have the same types of challenges that my children have, and not just focus on my family, not just focus on their challenges, but focus on how can we serve in a greater way. A second challenge that came up along the way was, as time went on, my family grew or got older. My oldest daughter went off to college. We were able to find a group home near our house to help take care of our twins. So we saw them all the time, but yeah, we weren't having to do all the work ourselves. And 6 months right after the twins moved out into their group home, my wife went back to work for the first time in 20 years, and 6 months later was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, second cancer. So she went through surgery, thought they got it all. Turns out they did not. So she went through 18 months of chemo and eventually passed away. So that was the next big challenge that I hadn't planned on. And there's a God story embedded in that as well. So my wife died on February. She died on February 11th, 2020. So she died a month before the pandemic hit. So she died February 11th, 2020. And 3 days later is Valentine's Day. Okay. So my oldest daughter had come back home for her mom's services, and she and her boyfriend, who is now her husband, wanted to go out to dinner for Valentine's Day, and I said that was fine. So they went out, and I went across the street from our house to a grocery store. We got something for dinner. And I walked into the grocery store, and I'm all sad and depressed, and woe is me. My best friend for 33 years just died. Arguably my only friend for 33 years just died. I'm all by myself. This is first Valentine's Day in 33 years to be by myself. Woe is me. What am I going to do? Life sucks. Blah, blah, blah. I'm walking through the store, and I get to one part in the store, aisle 9. It was the hair care aisle. Don't know if that's relevant, but that's where it happened. I mean, the hair care aisle, and all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. It was like that Saturday morning I described a moment ago. I went from being sad and downtrodden and depressed and upset to feeling positive and energetic and ready to take on the world. And in the blink of an eye, I believe God revealed 2 things to me with absolute clarity. Number 1 was Carol, my late wife, she was doing great. She was doing a lot better than the rest of us are. As a Christian, she was experiencing what all Christians ultimately aspire for, and that is to spend eternity with God. So she was doing great. And I viewed it as God releasing me from having to mourn my wife, because you don't mourn somebody who's doing better than you are.
Yeah, true.
Right? So there was that. Right. So I'm like, okay, so that's good. So that was the first thing. The second thing had to do with me. So I was 55 years old at the time. I'm 58 now. So I was 55 years old. I'd been married for 30 years. God willing, and I use those words literally, I may still have had another 30 years ahead of me. So from an adulting standpoint, I'm only halfway done. Also, for the first time in my life, I had virtually no obligations and responsibilities. So I was still working, but that was okay. But but beyond that, my wife was in heaven. My twins were in their group home. My oldest daughter was out of college and had a career going. So I was in the unique situation. I could do whatever I want. I'm like, well, how often does that happen? That's kind of a unique situation to be in. So the $1 million question became, okay, God, you've presented me with this opportunity to do whatever I want. What do you want me to do? And I think that the answer to that question is still being written. I wrote a book. Speaking of writing, I wrote a book entitled God's Plan, Our Circus, which I think is part of that plan. You can see the cover behind me. That's, I think, part of God's plan for me to put that out. I think you and I having this conversation may be part of that plan. So again, it's still a work in progress, but that has helped me get through the passing of my wife. Just like the advocacy work got me through having to deal with the challenges of my twins.
Amazing.
And I just talked a whole lot. I hope some of that
Yeah,
answered your question.
seriously, it did. It did. Your story is so inspiring, and this is going to transform a whole lot of people with disabilities. Okay, I've got two questions for you. Are you ready to round up with?
Okay, sure,
Okay. Disabilities are part of God's plan. You got that?
sure. So why do I believe my twins' disabilities are part of God's plan? Well, for one reason, the Bible tells me it did. So in my book, I describe several Bible references that explain God's view of disabilities and relationships to people with disabilities. And one of the things that's very clear, it's in the Psalms, where
Okay.
we're told that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the phrase in the Bible is you knitted me in my mother's womb.
Mm.
So God created everybody. He
Yeah.
created you. He created
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
He created my twins. He created people who are brilliant and geniuses, and he
Mm.
created those of us who are not.
Mm.
And the one thing I know for a fact is that God is a lot smarter than we are, and
Yeah.
God does not make mistakes.
Yeah.
Okay, so
True.
if people look at others who were born with a disability and say that person was a mistake, well, they're challenging God, because
Yeah.
you're basically saying that God made a mistake, which
Made a
doesn't
mistake.
happen.
Mm.
And the whole concept of skills and abilities is relative. Well, if my twins are a mistake, well, maybe I'm a mistake. How do I know I'm not? It's a bad
Yeah.
place to be, a mental place to be. But the truth of the matter is God created everybody, and he doesn't make mistakes. So that makes it right. Now, does that mean some people have more challenges than others? Absolutely. Does that mean those of us who are caregivers have some challenges in caring for those who need assistance? Yes, that is true. They do. But that doesn't make it wrong, and it doesn't make a mistake. So that's how to answer your question on how do I believe that my twins' disabilities are part of
Part
God's
of
plan.
God's plan.
It's because the Bible is very clear in saying that God designed all of us, and
Yeah.
all of us means all of us.
That's true. That's true because he created us all. You know, Apostle Paul was mentioning something about how he was given an instance about how a potter create a beautiful pot of clay, made it so beautiful, and that same potter made another one for like a waste bin where he's going to drop beans and all of that. He says, "Who then are you to say he did wrong?" You know, when some people were questioning the fact that since God made this particular person disobey him, why then would God punish him for disobeying him? So he gave them that example. So, and I understand from what you just said also, and that's so beautiful, and that has answered the question. Okay, so the second question.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, you
Mhm.
wanted to say something?
Well, no, yeah. If you don't mind, I was going to follow up on what you said.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
totally agree. Your point of view
Mm.
that the potter is the one who determines if something is right or wrong. There's also
Yeah.
another Bible verse that I use in the book. It's
Mm.
John 1 through 3, or
Okay.
John 9
Okay.
verses
Okay.
1 through 3, and
Okay.
it reads. I won't go through the whole verse, but the short
Yeah.
version is that Jesus came across a man blind from birth. And the
Mm.
disciples asked him, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?
Thank you
Because
for
a lot
that
of people believed back then,
reference.
and a
Yeah.
lot of people believe now that disabilities are a punishment from
Mm.
God. And Jesus replied, neither this man nor his parents sinned.
Parents
So neither
saint.
the man nor
Yeah.
the parents sinned.
Yeah.
But this happened. This
For the
happened so that the work
glorification
of
of
God could be
God.
seen in his life.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So that addresses the issue on, okay, is someone being punished? Well, no.
Yeah.
Short answer is no. There's no one's being punished, but
Correct.
all of us have opportunities, challenges, strengths, whatever, different elements of our lives, which are really in place to help us demonstrate God's power in our life. They're not
Yeah.
punishment. They're
Yeah,
there for
point.
God's specific purpose.
Mm. You just answered one most common question that people who's got disabilities, caregivers, this question they ask. Some says, God, why are
Hmm.
you punishing me? What did I do to deserve this punishment from you? What did I do wrong? Now, your answer just answered that question. Okay, so this now is so
Hmm.
important. This question is so important. All right, are you ready?
Okay.
Okay, it
Yeah.
says, what are the top five must do's for family with disabilities? Top five must do's.
What are the the top 5 things for families with disabilities? Okay,
Yeah,
that's actually pretty easy. I share this with a lot of people. And number one is if you're a parent raising a child with a disability, do everything in your abilities to get some help at home. That far and away is the number one thing that families and parents who are raising children with disabilities need to do. There's a belief that many parents have that, oh, I need to do it all by myself. Um, I call it a martyrdom syndrome. They're going to martyr themselves. They're going to kill themselves throw themselves on the sword because by golly, it's my job to do all this. And I'm going to make my life miserable and everybody else around me miserable and it's a ridiculous way to look. It adds to depression. You wind up a whole host of bad things happen. So as tough as it might be on the ego, the number one thing is to get help at home. So that's number one. Number two is to here in the States is to try and get on the Medicaid waiver programs. So there are programs funded by Medicaid, funded by the government, which can help families and people with severe disabilities. They're funded by the Medicaid program, but you need to apply for them. And in a lot of states, like in Texas, there are waiting lists. So you need to get on the waiting list for those. Number three is to take advantage of all community services. So different churches may offer programs, different cities may offer programs. A Friday night off where you can drop your child off for 3 or 4 hours and go to the store, go to a restaurant. Get involved in a church home is important. Again, I'm a faith-based guy, and I've shared part of my story. And all of us need to be inspired by God's word, and also our children, even though they may not fully understand what they're hearing, they need to be in God's house along with everybody else. So God's house exists for everybody, not just
yeah,
those of us who have a certain IQ and whatnot. And then the last thing is to get involved. So a lot of families, a lot of parents, and I understand it. They're focused on their immediate challenges of their own family and having to work and so on, and I understand that. But there's a huge benefit to getting involved with organizations, nonprofit organizations, church organizations, and so on that help because you're able to bring your experience. I was able to take my experience and share it with others, but also
yeah.
I learned a lot by talking
Mm,
to other people. It gives you exposure to different ideas and different things that can help you that you would
that's true.
never encounter, or you'd encounter it much later if you
Yeah,
didn't get involved. So getting involved and helping is a huge, huge benefit.
thank you so very much for answering that question that way. You answered it in
Sure.
such a way that it was very easy to understand and apply and practice. That's so good.
Oh, thank you.
So, yeah, so what would you like to say to any family or anyone with disabilities? Now, I don't know what to do, how to handle this situation. It's so killing, and what would you like to say to such person or such people?
Thank you. Really, there were 2 things. One, we just covered. I just kind of gave 5 ideas that can help families. So think about those and take advantage of those to the best you can. That would help. And the second has more to do with an attitude and an approach. And this is an approach that I've taken through all the various challenges that I've encountered over my life. At the end of the book, I share a conversation that I had with a woman, and she asked for my life story, and so I gave her the quick version. And when I was done, she said, "Well, Clay, we all have experiences and challenges, baggage and drama. Experiences and challenges, baggage and drama." And I paused for a second, and I said, "Well, yes and no. We all have experiences and challenges. That's absolutely true. Every single one of us has experiences and challenges.
Yeah, true.
But baggage and drama are optional. Baggage and drama are optional. It's all in how you choose to look at it.
Yeah.
And happiness is a choice." And when I put that in the book and I went back and reread it, I realized that's kind of the theme for the entire story, is that challenges will come our way, and we have no choice in that. The only thing we can control is how we respond to it. We can't control that bad things happen. We can't control the things that we don't like show up every week. What we can control is how we choose to respond. And happiness is a choice, and positivity is a choice. I believe there are some people who, for whatever reason, they seem to enjoy being depressed. And now depression is a legitimate diagnosis, so I'm not talking about that. But there are people who that being sad is part of their identity.
I get
They want they want everybody to know they're sad. Right. They want everybody to know how miserable their life is. And that's not a healthy way to live. And again, there are people who have clinical illnesses who where therapy and help, professional help can do wonders. So if people need that, I strongly encourage it. But there are also a lot of people who maybe don't need that level of assistance, but who, if you just started looking at things differently and realizing that you can choose a different attitude. Is it hard? It can be. It can be very hard. But I've read my Bible cover to cover, and nowhere in there does it say life is easy. So there are some tough things, but it really is attitude that plays in a lot in terms of helping get through difficult situations.
Thank you for that. You just answered that question accurately. That's so good. So that's going to be the end of the show. Thank you, Clay, for honoring the invite. It means a whole lot. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's so good. All right, so that's going to be the end. Okay, in case anyone would be interested in getting a copy of your book, how would that be possible? How can they get a copy of your book?
Well, it is available on Amazon. Oh, look at me. I just happen to have a copy right here. That's convenient.
Okay, beautiful.
So you can get it on Amazon. Again, it's called God's Plan, Our Circus. God's Plan, Our Circus. You can go on my website, which is Clay Boatright, ClayBoatright.com. I can order it through there. To be honest with you, Amazon's going to probably be faster, but I would encourage people to read it, and I would be very honored if they would, and they can reach out to me through the website if they want to talk about it, or if they have any questions or issues. I would be happy to speak with them.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for that. I love that. All right, so that's going to be the end. Thank you. Bye.
All right, Ted.
Thank you for tuning in to this incredible episode. Your support means the world to us, and we truly value you. We look forward to having you join us for the next episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback is greatly appreciated.